The studio lights of Lorraine always carried a comforting warmth. Pastel sofas, gentle music, and Lorraine Kelly's familiar smile were designed to make guests relax, open up, and feel safe. That Tuesday morning was meant to be no different. The production schedule promised a prestigious interview. Sir Gary Oldman, Oscar-winning actor, Hollywood legend, and recent star of a critically acclaimed historical drama. Ratings were expected to spike. Social media teasers were already circulating. No one expected the show to spiral into chaos before the second commercial break. Gary arrived early, dressed sharply but simply, a dark blazer, open-collared shirt, no tie. He looked calm, almost reserved, greeting staff with polite nods and quiet thank yous. To the crew, he seemed like the consummate professional, serious, focused, and a little distant but respectful. Lorraine herself was excited. She admired his work deeply and had been looking forward to a thoughtful conversation about his career resurgence and the discipline behind his craft. Backstage, however, there was tension Gary couldn't quite shake. The night before, he'd read a preview of the interview questions, standard fare, mostly flattering. But one line stood out. A producer had scribbled a note next to a segment titled, Controversies and Regrets. It referenced old comments Gary had made years ago in a heated interview, comments he had publicly apologized for and moved beyond. He frowned at the page. "I thought we agreed not to go there," he'd said calmly to the junior producer. She'd smiled nervously. "Just a brief mention, Sir Gary. Lorraine likes to keep things honest." Gary had nodded, but something about it unsettled him. He'd spent years rebuilding his public image, not through PR tricks, but through consistency, humility, and work. He wasn't interested in reopening old wounds for morning television soundbites. Still, he told himself, it's Lorraine Kelly. She's fair. She won't ambush me. At precisely 9 a.m., the theme music played, and Lorraine welcomed viewers at home with her usual warmth. The interview began smoothly. They talked about Gary's early days in theater, his love for transformation, and the discipline he brought to every role. "You disappear into characters like no one else," Lorraine said, smiling. "Do you ever lose yourself in them?" Gary chuckled softly. "I hope not. If I did, I'd never find my way back home." The audience laughed gently. Everything felt easy, comfortable. Then Lorraine shifted slightly in her seat. "You've had quite a journey, Gary," she said. "Not just professionally, but personally too." Gary felt it immediately, the tonal change, subtle but unmistakable. "Yes," he replied cautiously. "Like most people." Lorraine nodded. "There were moments in the past where things got a bit complicated. Comments you made, opinions that caused a stir. Do you ever worry that those moments still define how people see you?" The studio seemed to hold its breath. Gary's smile faded, not dramatically, but noticeably. He adjusted his posture, folding his hands together. "I've addressed those comments many times," he said evenly. "I took responsibility. I apologized. I learned. I've moved on." Lorraine maintained her calm expression, but pressed on. "Some people feel the apologies weren't enough," she said. "That public figures should be held accountable indefinitely." A murmur rippled through the audience. Gary's jaw tightened. "Accountability isn't a life sentence," he said. His voice remained low, but there was steel in it now. "Growth has to mean something. Otherwise, we're just punishing people forever." Lorraine blinked, surprised by the firmness. "I'm just voicing what some viewers might think," she replied gently. "This is about conversation." Gary leaned forward slightly. "With respect," he said, "conversation requires context. And this feels like reopening something for effect, not understanding." The temperature in the studio rose several degrees. Lorraine tried to soften it. "I'm not attacking you, Gary. But it feels like you are," he replied, more sharply than before. The director's voice crackled anxiously in the control room. Cameras stayed tight on their faces. Lorraine shifted again. "You're a role model to many. Don't you think revisiting these moments helps others learn?" Gary exhaled slowly, then looked straight at her. "No," he said. "I think living better helps others learn. I'm not a headline from 10 years ago. I'm a human being who made mistakes and did the work to change." The audience fell silent. Lorraine's smile stiffened. "Well, that's one way to see it. That's the honest way," Gary shot back. A few gasps echoed. This was no longer a friendly morning chat. It was a confrontation unfolding live. Lorraine attempted to regain control. Gary, we're not here to argue. Then stop pushing, he interrupted, his patience finally fraying. You invited me here to talk about my work, not to stage a moral trial. The word trial landed heavily. Lorraine's tone cooled. You don't need to be defensive. Gary stood up. That single movement sent shockwaves through the studio. I'm not defensive, he said, voice firm, eyes blazing. I'm setting a boundary. Producers waved frantically from off camera. The floor manager whispered urgently, but Gary didn't sit back down. If this is where the interview is going, he continued, then I'm done. Lorraine stared at him, stunned. Are you walking off? She asked. Gary nodded once. Yes. The director cut to a wide shot, then abruptly to Lorraine as Gary removed his microphone. The audience was dead silent now, no applause, no murmurs. Just disbelief. Lorraine forced a professional smile as cameras kept rolling. Well, she said shakily, we'll take a short break. But before the music could even play, Gary turned back. One last thing, he said, looking directly into the camera. Growth matters. If we don't allow it, we're all doomed to our worst moments. Then he walked off set. Backstage erupted. Producers argued. Staff whispered. Social media exploded within seconds. Clips of the exchange were already being shared, captioned with words like, explosive, uncomfortable, and unprecedented. In the control room, Lorraine sat quietly, headset still on, staring at the empty sofa across from her. She hadn't expected this, not from Gary Oldman. And as the show cut to commercial, one question hung heavily in the air. Had Lorraine pushed too far, or had Gary just torpedoed his own reputation on live television? The moment the cameras stopped rolling, the calm, pastel world of Lorraine collapsed into controlled chaos. Producers rushed across the studio floor, voices raised but careful. Years of live television had trained them never to fully lose control. A floor manager disappeared down the corridor after Gary Oldman, while another staff member ushered the stunned studio audience out for an early break. Phones buzzed everywhere. Twitter, now X, was already ablaze. Backstage, Gary stood in a quiet hallway, hands in his pockets, breathing slowly. He didn't look angry anymore. If anything, he looked tired. A producer finally caught up to him. Gary, please, can we talk about this? Gary turned calmly. I've said everything I needed to say. I won't be used. But this will be everywhere, she insisted. Headlines, clips. He nodded. It already would have been. At least now it's honest. With that, he picked up his coat and walked out of the building, cameras already waiting beyond the doors. Inside the studio, Lorraine Kelly remained, seated through the break, staring at her cue cards as if they'd betrayed her. She'd interviewed politicians, grieving parents, controversial celebrities. She prided herself on warmth, empathy, and balance. Never in her career had a guest walked out like that. The director spoke gently into her headset. Lorraine, we're back in 30 seconds. She closed her eyes briefly, then straightened. When the show returned, Lorraine addressed viewers directly. Well, that wasn't what we expected this morning, she said carefully. Live television can bring strong feelings, and we respect our guests, even when conversations become difficult. It was polished, professional, but viewers could hear the strain. By the time the show ended, #Gary Oldman and #Lorraine Kelly were both trending nationwide. The internet takes sides. Within hours, the incident had become the dominant media story of the day. Clips circulated with dramatic captions. Gary Oldman destroys Lorraine Kelly live. Lorraine pushes too far, Gary walks off. Boundary or breakdown. Opinion split sharply. Supporters of Gary praised him for standing his ground. Why should someone apologize forever? One viral post read, growth means nothing if we don't allow people to move on. Others weren't convinced. Walking off a show isn't setting boundaries, another wrote. It's avoiding accountability. Media commentators dissected every word, every pause, every facial expression. Body language experts appeared on afternoon news programs. PR specialists debated whether Gary's move was brave or reckless. And looming over everything was one uncomfortable truth. Morning television wasn't supposed to look like this. Gary breaks his silence. For 2 days, Gary Oldman said nothing. No tweets. No statements. No carefully crafted apology. His silence only fueled speculation. Then, On the third day, a short post appeared on his official social media. I believe in accountability. I also believe in growth. When conversations stop being about understanding and start becoming about punishment, it's time to step away. That was it. No mention of Lorraine. No attack. No apology. The post went viral within minutes. To many, it sounded measured and dignified. To critics, it sounded evasive. But behind the scenes, something unexpected was happening. Lorraine's perspective. Lorraine Kelly wasn't celebrating the attention. In a private meeting with ITV executives, she replayed the interview again and again. I didn't mean to ambush him, she said quietly. I thought we were having an honest discussion. An executive sighed. Intent doesn't always match impact. Publicly, Lorraine maintained her professionalism. But days later, during a separate interview on another program, she finally addressed it more personally. I never want a guest to feel cornered, she said. But I also believe public conversations can be uncomfortable. That's not always a bad thing. She paused. Still, I wish it had gone differently. It was the closest thing to an admission viewers would get. Some praised her honesty. Others felt it wasn't enough. An unexpected call. A week later, Gary received a call he didn't expect. It was Lorraine. There were no cameras. No producers. Just two professionals on the phone. I didn't call to argue, she said. I called because I don't like how it ended. Gary was quiet for a moment. Neither do I, he replied. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Not about headlines or blame, but about how interviews had changed, how outrage culture shaped conversations, how easily intentions were misread. I should have listened more, Lorraine admitted. And I could have stayed calmer, Gary conceded. No one recorded the call. No statement followed, but both walked away lighter. The long-term impact. Weeks passed. The media storm slowly moved on, as it always did. Gary Oldman's upcoming film premiered to strong reviews. At the press junket, journalists tried to bait him with questions about the incident. He smiled politely and redirected every time, to the film, the cast, the work. Lorraine Kelly continued her show, perhaps a little more cautiously, but still with the warmth viewers expected. Yet something had shifted. Producers across networks quietly adjusted interview strategies. Boundaries became a bigger topic. Guests demanded clearer agreements. Hosts reconsidered how far was too far, especially live. The incident became a case study in broadcasting circles. Where does accountability end and spectacle begin? Final reflection. Months later, a media columnist summed it up best. No one really won that morning. But perhaps everyone learned something. Gary Oldman hadn't stormed off in rage. He'd walked away to protect a line he refused to let be crossed. Lorraine Kelly hadn't set out to humiliate him. She'd tried to spark a conversation that slipped out of her control. In the end, the fiery exchange wasn't about one actor or one host. It was about a culture still learning how to talk. And when to stop.